Thank you for stopping by Nurture Small Business Podcast. I am your host, Denise Cagan. If you're looking for stories that lift up women business owners, both in their personal and professional lives, you are at the right place. As always, if you like what you hear on today's podcast, please share it. You have my gratitude for doing so. Welcome to today's episode of Nurture Small Business, where we talk about all things business, and especially as it relates to women. Now, my guest today has almost 2 decades of experience, and you couldn't guess that by looking at her. I'm just going to say that. She excels in optimizing performance across industries, and she works with the C-suite and often finds that they 10x their investment. Welcome to the show, Kareen Walsh. How are you today?
I'm so great, Denise. So great to be here. Happy to serve you and your audience.
So, Kareen, where are you located?
I'm in the New York metro area. So technically my address is in Connecticut, but I literally can throw a stone into New York. So it's very close.
Interesting. When I lived in Charlotte, it was like that with South Carolina. It's like you could throw a stone and you were in the next state.
Yeah. It's pretty wild when that happens, right? When you're on the border of something.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, you know what? I went across your website and through your bio and I looked and I found something very, very interesting. You may be the only person that I have seen doing this. As a matter of fact, you use apps to deliver your services, do you not?
Yeah, I do. I launched my Hey Kareen app last year and I leverage AI, which is even another thing most people aren't doing.
Ooh, so start with the apps. I am like super, super curious about the apps and what you're doing there.
Yeah, so as you said in your intro, it's, I've been doing this now. I think I've hit almost that 20-year threshold of building, running, launching, shutting down, rebuilding again, like whatever business operation that has been out there in regards to scaling and growth and or advising and investing. Like I've been in it. And I realized that I was becoming the capacity issue as to why people couldn't leverage the skill set I have. And I was trying to do it through the coaching methods that had come out previously, which is like, okay, build your site, get them to the program, like let them do an online thing, evergreen it, like all the things. Believe me, I've tried to just assist other entrepreneurs in building the business they like and enjoy showing up for by knowing who they have to become to do it. And I no longer wanted to be the excuse as to why people couldn't have access to all the acumen and start taking action. So last year, with AI on the cusp of things and realizing that new technology allows us to serve faster, I decided to integrate everything I've done into an app, clone myself in AI, so you literally can have a business coach on the go as you're actually going through it. And it's pretty phenomenal the way it has been working. It's going through its enhancements now too, just like anything in tech does. When you release something, it's generally like your MVP and then you get people testing it and they give you feedback. We've gotten a lot of feedback, changes are happening, but the impact is there that I was hoping for. So anything regards to my content, my programs, just interacting with me is all now centralized in the Hey Kareen app experience.
Wow. What brought you to the place to say, hey, let's do this?
I think it was, I love tech. Like I've come up in tech that was the start of my career in San Francisco. I helped launch different platforms back then. And then all the complexities around it taught me how to do it better and faster with my clients. That's what people initially hired me for when I used to sell my time for money. And then as I built and scaled my consulting practice and my business, I found that every audience I talk to or every client I talk to, there are moments where they're like, I wish I could just carry you around in my pocket. Like literally would say, I wish I could carry you around my pocket. And most of them would just text me because you could, in essence, carry me around. We carry each other around all the time. But in this case, they're like, but your service. Like, I wish I could know that I could just reach out to you and get the instant answer so that I can move forward. Because every time I talk to you, you give me clarity, you help me jump into action, you make me feel seen, all the things. And I was like, okay, so how do I do that? So really the idea came from, how do I serve a wider net of people in the need as they have it? So that's what I meant by a capacity problem with me, is like my schedule and my hours are only so many that I give for one-on-one support. Like I'm very, very selective around who I work with, because it takes a certain investment to work with me at this stage of my career, but also my time. I really am someone who's very conscious of how I spend my time. And so when I looked at the problem I was facing in duplicating myself right out there, and also the ease of now that we all have these handheld devices that we're on all the time, how can I create that focused experience so someone can actually carry me around, but it's not actually my time that is the issue for that? So that was the initial push behind it. And the impact about it has been great, because people have tested it who are in my life, who I have coached, and they come and they ask me, and they do ask me their Hey Kareen question in a text message to me, and then they'll go into the app and have their Hey Kareen question there. And it's kind of funny when they're like, oh my gosh, she says exactly what you just told me. I was like, yeah, because she's me. Like that. And it's just not me and my time. And you didn't have a delay. Like I got you the response hours later when I got out of all my meetings, when I got, you got it right away there. So I think that piece was the biggest part of the why behind it. And the how it got done was just really about assessing what was in the market tech-wise, and then seeing how can I kind of piece it together for the experience to prove that my community wants it, which I think anybody who's out there launching products is always to validate before you fully invest because it's an expensive venture. But I think that's a big lesson learned after all the years I've done in the tech space of delivering complex projects, that you always want to validate your market wants it before you build it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. You said something, trading my time for money.
Yeah.
Why did you say that?
Because that's what it is. Employment, whether you're a full-time employee under someone else's container or designing your container as an entrepreneur, you still have to decide where your time is going to be spent for your earnings. The difference between being an employee and then being your own entrepreneur or going on your own venture, you decide the role you play, and you also decide if you can earn off other people's efforts, right? So when I came up in my career, I was employed by other people's companies, and I always maximized how much I could earn and do with the time that I was willing to give them. It definitely in my 20s led to burnout and a lot of corporate climbing for the money and the experience and the skill set. But I was trading my life for that check, right? Like I had a great career, but I had no life. And then when I did flip it and I resigned from a position at 29, I had joined a company in San Francisco where I was a business analyst and grew to a senior director of mergers and acquisition operations in about 5 years, and which is what unheard of in this company, but I was that aggressive career-wise. Again, burnt me out, but still pushed hard. I resigned and decided to go and just sell my own time for money as a consultant so I could control a little bit about where my time was spent, a lot about my life. And that was a big game changer for me in that 29 to 30, because I saw what it meant to be in control of my earnings. I also knew I was willing to do what it would take because I had done it in other people's containers. And it was the first time I felt that self-employment bug of trading my time for money back then.
Okay. The reason I brought that up is I suspect that you coach people on this trading time for money concept and how it interrelates to burnout. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So the stress around doing it all yourself, right, as a self-employed person, is that not only are you selling your contracts, you have to build your relationship with your clients. You're the one doing the service. Like, then you have to make sure you close out that project while you go market yourself for the next. Like, you're basically dipping into all the expertise required to start a business as one person. And it can definitely lead to burnout. It also, if you're not pricing yourself properly against the market value that is stated for your expertise, which I know a lot of people I've had to coach on building their what I call your magnetic money mindset. Because if you don't have a clear value on what you're willing to charge for your time, that devaluation also leads to burnout, because you're constantly in this resentment of the money you're actually making because you're not getting paid enough for your time. And I also like to say that when your hustle becomes a hassle, it's no longer for you. And that's another route to burnout. It's like, if you're feeling hassled by why you're even showing up in this business, again, it starts to deplete who you are. It starts to affect your life decisions. And then you're sitting in a whole bunch of resentment versus building what you chose to do, which is a business where you can work for yourself and the so-called freedom. And I use my quotation hands because it can feel like a large entrapment to build a business if you don't know what you're doing and how to protect your time and leverage your expertise.
I agree wholeheartedly. When I first started working with an advisor, one of the things she said to me, because I was ready to quit every other month. I'm done. I'm over this. And she said, you need to first get the business where you can pay yourself like a CEO.
Yeah.
And when I started doing that, most of that melted away. Not to say it's all about money, but when you also have financial woes on top of how do I, steer this ship that, there's, 10 or 15 other people that are part of the crew. How do I do this? It becomes very overwhelming.
It can be, for sure. And also, I've seen a lot of folks make rushed hiring decisions and not necessarily know how that would actually create freedom for them, meaning freedom of the tasks that actually are holding you back from the business that you're meant to focus on and build, right? Like, are you hiring the right way to replace the wrong tasks for you with an expert that actually does it really well? That's another, I think, gotcha in that moment too, of the phase you were just talking about, where it's growing past what you know and into leading your business,
right?
Not running it, like, just operating it, to step past that.
We actually, about a year and a half ago, we started into the book Who, and Jeffrey Smart, and we started hiring that way. I can tell you it takes a whole lot more work.
It does. To
vet and qualify. Are so much better.
Yes. The results are always better, though, when you do it that way.
Yes.
But first you have to learn, and because this is what I help my clients do too, is who you have to become to lead it. And I think that's also a big missing step in growth phases of businesses. It's like, we can have these aspirational goals. We can go after this target. Like, when I first mapped out my 7-figure plan in my business, it was a stretch goal to get me out of my own way, because I wasn't going to commit to a 40-hour work week, 500 an hour. That's 7 figures. Did I want to do that? No. Could I have earned things that way? Sure. But that's not the life I wanted. So my challenge to myself was, okay, Kareen, what if you wanted to earn 7 figures in this business, but only use 20% of your time doing it? Now, what would that look like? And that's that CEO mindset that your advisor is talking about, where the income will always come if you're strategic about how it's earned across many versus you as the only one, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. So tell me a little bit about who you work with. I know it said CEOs and, the 10X potential there. Can you give me also a case study, so to speak? You don't have to name names, of course, but
sure.
Would love to hear about that.
Yeah. So, the advisory work I do, it's different levels, right? So I have like an advisory level where I am sitting with a C-suite, or kind of it's like an augmented board seat of existing companies that are just wanting to make sure as they tweak and navigate that they are aligning with the right strategies across people, process, and technology. Because my mind always works that way. That's not necessarily where I attract the most attention and the most impact. Because for me, what I love are the companies that are in the growth spurts. Because when you're in a growth spurt, whichever level you're growing through, you always have to look at yourself, not just the strategies around getting your business that way. And I think the differentiator in the way I work with my clients, who are generally entrepreneurs who have proven sales to some degree in a consistent way, but maybe have flatlined a little bit, like they haven't figured out the what's next. How do I take it to the next level? Or they're exponentially grown, but it doesn't feel sustainable how they did it. And so they need refinement on the operational side or the leadership side to make sure that the growth is sustained over time. Then I work with them first to map out where are they trying to go, what's the vision, and then we break down, who do they have to become to do it, while we talk through strategies of how to get there. So a case study would be, I'm trying to think of who I would want to share that would be good context for your audience. In the past 3 years, I worked with a medical clinic that was out of California, where the doctors that ran it, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, because this equates to anyone who's the specialist. When a specialist of something, some skill, some certification turns it into a business, and they're the owner of the business and the specialty, it becomes very conflicting as to where they focus their time. Right. And so they were running a great, almost on that 7-figure mark clinic. They had been in business for a while, but there were constraints around their partnership and the way that they actually run that business, and who attracts what in, and how do they split, all the things. Because basically when a business gets started, you kind of think of the best case scenario and not necessarily if it goes the other way. And then if it starts to go the other way, there becomes this scramble and kind of this, very intense, what do we do now? Which is quite reactionary. So one of the doctors reached out to me, and she was the more administrative person out of the two. So a lot of the operational work was landing on her because that's how her mind worked. Mm-hmm. But the equality of how the equity was split was even. And that felt very unfair to her. And so we had to not only redesign their partnership, we had to figure out what her path was that would light her up in order to lead it, because they had a lot of amazing clients and their reputations were known, but they needed to scale their business to a different level, as well as change how they were showing up in it. So we worked on not only the structure between them and redefined it. I ended up, working with them as a whole company, and then brought in the right team members to assist them to relieve things, because I have a consulting and recruitment side to one of my businesses. So I can actually hire and place people as needed after coaching with them, which is great. And then we managed to get to a decision where they were like, we really just don't even want to run this clinic anymore. I think we want to go back to being independent. So what if we sold it? So we managed their exit as well. Oh. And then I independently coach them, and I coach each doctor individually to build their own practices again. So it's pretty wild what can happen when you're in dialogue around your own personal needs, as well as how that integrates to your business, to decide where that, takes you. So now, they were able to sell their practice. They're still advisors in that, what they built to date, because they had a healthy client base and also methodology that was worth selling. Like they had IP. And then in their private practices, I was able to work with each one individually on however they wanted to scale that practice. So one of the doctors, she's like straight fire. She on her own, when she had it to just work for herself, and built her own clinic again, now has a thriving, 7-figure practice just on her own because of the model that we were able. Now she could look at business a different way and how she has to approach it, and also has way more time back to have the life she wants, which is really cool. So that's probably one of the best cases of many, but that was a really cool. I'm very proud of her for how far she's come, and just happy that she found an aligned way to leverage her specialty.
Absolutely. I actually have seen this dilemma in the dentistry space where they're the specialist, and so they're performing the work, and yet their growth is based on that, yet they can't operate the business. So
no.
Yes.
So every business has a creator, an entrepreneur, and an operator role. They call it the CEO conundrum when you're a one-stop shop because you're really meant to be one of those roles. And that I did create a quiz for that, so I could share that, at our end of the conversation with folks. But it's something that is so critical to understand what's your innate desire to do every day, because then you'll know why you're suffering and potentially sitting in overwhelm. You might be doing all three when really it should be just the one, and now you know who to go hire for. And I think that clarity is needed across the board if you're really sitting in that, suffering for success, antiquated model, because we don't have to anymore. We really don't. We're so much smarter, and technology can help us so much. To really assess, well, why? It's probably because you're showing up in tasks that just don't light you up or you don't want to do, and you just don't know how to even delegate or figure out a way to get out of your own way, is what I like to say.
So speaking of getting out of your own way, I spoke to an entrepreneur a couple days ago, and he said that, I recently was building up. I got 30% more business, and then I spent the last couple months getting rid of that 30% of business because it wasn't the right kind of business.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you work with entrepreneurs, defining?
I love that consciousness that he had, though. What a great example of true entrepreneurship freedom, right? We choose this every day as entrepreneurs. We choose our hard. And we can scale. I could easily go out and sell all sorts of services right now that I have zero interest in doing because I'm a good salesperson, right? But I wouldn't want to do that because that would definitely make me suffer on the other side. And I love his consciousness. What a great example of how to be a conscious leader, because sometimes we do go down a path of something that we're guided to do by someone else's model, let's just say, and we attract in more money. But the actions to sustain that or deliver against that deal is so critical to understand. Is it aligned with what you actually want to spend your time on, right? So I love that. I love that as a end result to his growth, because it was a false growth. He would have never wanted to sustain that level if that service is something he didn't want to do in the first place. But what he did prove was that he knows how to sell. And that's good in any business.
Absolutely. We experienced something like that as well. It was government contracting. Everybody kept telling us, "Oh, you need to do government contracting. You'll earn so much." Blah blah blah. Whoosh! Was that a nightmare?
Yeah, they can be. They really can be.
We spent a lot of time and a lot of effort and resources. And somebody brought it up to us recently, and we're like, "Ooh, shut or no."
Yeah. Well, because it's a mammoth. Like when you think about government systems, their agility is not a word that's used to describe them. And so if your company itself has an agility to it and you're more nimble, it's very conflicting to work through a government contract. But if you're willing to be as slow as steady and wait and understand approval process and understand who's the decision maker, and really, I'm not a patient person. I always say patience is a skill, definitely not my virtue. I have to practice
Patience is a
it.
skill. Absolutely.
Yeah, patience is a skill, and I've had to at times, but that's part of why I think I'm unemployable at this point, I have to work for myself because I get to set my own pace.
I can relate to that. I really can relate to that.
Yeah.
All right, Kareen, what should I have asked you that I haven't asked you?
Oh, gosh. I mean, there's so many years on this planet. It's more about what do you want to know? I not asked me? I just think we're at this time, and so I'll post it as a statement, and then you see if there's a question for it. But I think we're at this time where we have to really focus on what is blocking us from filling our own cup, so that if we are in any sort of leadership role, like how to become better leaders in today's world. It's a very complex world we're in right now. And I feel like we need to breed more conscious leaders, If I were to help in that in any way, it's really getting back to the core of who you are and starting to lead from a place of value. I think it's the critical time. Like, we just need that more and more now. Is kind of where I feel there's a gap in conversation,
Yeah. I often hear business owners say something along the lines, well, I just like to help people. And it sounds very altruistic and doesn't quite feel like it hits the mark, actually.
No, because help is, I want to say temporary. Whereas if you actually learn how to show someone else how to lead, that is permanent. Like, it's more, it's if you're doing it for them, I guess that's like the help part, where it's more about like, let me give you examples and coach you how to step up into it, or advise on an approach here. Go try this out and tell me how that comes back, but know that it's a safe space to trip up. Like, I think we have to get rid of any sort of fears on failure. And I think we have to really trust our intuition more and step into ways of showing up for others that are more heart-centered, So the help statement comes from a desire because you care. But now I feel like we can care and also lead. And I think that is needed more and more. And it's not just about what's happening in the bank, because the money will come and go. It's really about the impact of all of us succeeding and all of us feeling good about what we're going after, and finding ways of how we support each other in business, I think, is important too.
Do you work mostly with women?
I would say it's been a mix over the years. I attract a lot of women who see me as an aspirational goal. Like, they are attracted to my strength, my confidence, my ability to be super light in a moment, but then also very strategic, right? And then the men that are attracted to working with me, I think, are those who are looking for clarity and more openness, like less strategy, more communication. And it's an interesting attraction, because I feel like working with both is needed in order to have a more equitable culture that we step into as women in business, right? Everybody kind of needs to learn the best tactics out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So, Kareen, before we sign off for the day, how can people find you?
Well, if you're interested in taking that quiz to know what your ideal role is in your business, or even in your role, if you're working for a company right now and you're thinking to transition into entrepreneurship, I definitely recommend it. But it's heykareen.com/CEO, and that's Kareen with an N. So it's KAREEN.com/CEO. If you'd like to take that quiz. Also, that's how you get heykareen.com is access to the app. So all the information about my app, to ask questions. If you want to see the behind the scenes of entrepreneurship or get live tips, I'm on Instagram more than anything. So that's Kareen Z. Walsh. And then KareenWalsh.com is where you can find ways to be coached by me, or speaking events, workshops, whatever I'm up to. But if you'd also like to book time with me, that is where you go for that.
Perfect. We'll make sure that all those links are in our show notes so that folks can easily find you.
Amazing. Thanks, Denise.
You're welcome, Kareen. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for joining me for today's podcast, where I focus on women in business and how we can be allies to one another. Please rate us on the podcast app that you listen to the most, and send me any ideas you have for podcast topics or any other feedback. I love to hear from my listeners. You can reach me at Denise@dcavirtual.com.